Cold War was really cold. I mean, it was a pretty grim time. Eisenhower, the inauguration of Eisenhower was on January 20th, 1953. Stalin died on March 6th of 1953. We thought that there could be some real good stuff happening. During the 1960 campaign, there was a hardening even by Kennedy. Kennedy had a real hard line about about the inadequacy of America's buildup and keeping up in the military, and Khrushchev at that time, according to his own memoirs, had hoped to be able to get Kennedy in and create more of a peace movement. And Kennedy made, from what I've read, some kind of serious goofs at the start. In 1961, three things of significance happened that would affect all of us, but in my life as well. The one was the disaster of the Bay of Pigs, which in my research was brought on totally by Alan Dulles. The second was that Kennedy made his famous speech on May 25th of 1961 that we were going to go to the moon in this decade. And as I stated in the book, in my little memoir, Sputnik, which caused everybody to get a little bit rattled, sort of brought the country together like 9/11 did. You know, it just focused it, but in a technical sense, not in a war sense. But Sputnik happened on October 4th, 1957, while I was in my senior year in high school. The next thing that happened in 1961 was Kennedy's humiliation in front of Khrushchev in Vienna in June of 1961. And then Khrushchev was having his own difficulties, and with the Prime Minister, or whatever you call it, of East Germany, whose name was Ulbricht, was carrying a very hard line with the East Germans just fleeing to get out of East Germany, and they would get into Berlin, which is way inside of the East German territory, and be able to then start over or get out and get into West Germany or whatever. And so on on August 13 at 12:03 a.m. Berlin time, they started building the Berlin Wall. And within 2 weeks, within maybe 3 weeks, I was drafted. I selected not to take the draft. I selected to take an extra year, and I joined what is called the Army Security Agency, and wound up spending almost all of my non-training time in Turkey, most of it in Incirlik Air Base, Adana, Turkey, flying in Navy A3D jets in their electronic countermeasures section, tracking Russian satellites. Well, on those bases over there, sitting at the end of the runway all of the time, were F-105s, the fastest jet at the time, loaded with nuclear weapons. And I arrived in Turkey in July of 1962, and I was reassigned down to Incirlik Air Base in October of 1962, and I got there like 3 days or a day before the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. And Kennedy had already ordered the removal of our Jupiter missiles, because they were called the first strike missile, because they had to be loaded to go at that time. They were a liquid fuel. and we were bringing in Minuteman and Polaris submarine with solid rockets, so that they were all loaded with nuclear weapons. And so the place was just streaming with nuclear weapons. And so when I was there, and this is after Richland, but it has to do with Richland very seriously. I was picked up from my barracks one morning by military police, taken out into the desert, and told, with some of my other buddies, and given a rifle and told to guard this thing, huge chain link fence with concertina wire over the top, and this thing is steaming out there. Well, what are we doing here? Well, you're guarding this Jupiter missile, but don't worry about it, they said. They know where this thing is. The Russians, the Soviets know where this thing is, and they'll get us before we get them. You'll be the first casualty of World War III. How comforting could that be? So, in my entire experience, I related it back to this, the building of the weapons, and the hope of the peaceful use, the nuclear power plants and that sort of thing. And of course, that's what they were building out there as well. Was part of the electricity was coming from nuclear power plants, even though we had Grand Coulee Dam just upstream a few miles.